Hi.
Hey Bob, how are you?
Well, pretty good. How are you?
Hanging in there. Did you ride your bike all the way out here?
Well, I've got the bike here. I rode the last mile from Southwest. Did you bike here?
I did not.
Because I did see you biking over to the Quarter Management Committee.
I did bike to that meeting, yeah. I try when I can.
Got time for a quick question?
Sure.
Okay. Now, as you know,
I promise it'll be quick and quicker than some of your remarks are.
Yeah, well, here goes. So the legislature, you know, took back $30 million that had been appropriated for Southwest Light Rail. Now there's a total of $15 million they've appropriated, and the plan for $1.65 billion would be $165 million from the legislature. So
there'll be 150.
Well, yeah, there's going to say there'd be $150 million short.
Yep.
Now, I talked to Speaker Dowd at the special session. He said the legislature is not putting any more money in next year. So, you know, with 150 million there and another 150 matching, where are you going to get 300 million to get the 1.65 billion of funding?
Well, the funds are a little bit more complicated than that. There's HICRA's funds, CTIP's funds, and the state share. So the 150 that you talk about is the only amount that's in question. The rest of the whole local share is already accounted for. And it's up to us to make the case that the project warrants the other 150.
Okay, but you do agree that with the 150 missing from the state, that really is 300 million because
no, it's not 300.
No, because it's.
You're talking about the feds matching it. Well, the feds don't match some of the money and not all of it. They match half of the entire non-federal share. So the question is, if the state share doesn't come through, can we find $150 million somewhere else?
Yeah,
and that would be up to us to do that, either through the Met Council or through other local governments that care about this project.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I appreciate it.
Welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon, good evening, Madam Chair. Mark Furman, Program Director for LRT Projects for the Council, and Mary Bogey, Chief Financial Officer, bring this item to you this evening. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, set the foundation, and then I will pass it over to Mary. I do have slides. So we're very happy 2 years ago, upon conclusion of the legislative session, where there was some available general fund, that the legislature chose to appropriate it directly to the council for the purpose of the Southwest LRT in the amount of $37 million. That gave us a total of state share appropriated going back a number of years of $44 million of the $165 million that would be required for the 10% state share. But unfortunately, we come to you 2 years later where the legislature has deemed to defund or rescind almost 30 million of that $37 million appropriation. So that creates an immediate shortfall for us as we continue our engineering work in the project office. And that shortfall is quantified at about 13 million here just for this calendar year. We have been using state funds to pay our bills up through the month of April, but upon legislative action here in the last 2 weeks, those state funds are no longer available. Big picture, just to refresh those of you, since we haven't talked about this recently, is the project which you approved at $1.65 billion last July. That continues to be project budget as we go through our review of scope and cost reductions. We'll be back on Wednesday night to talk with you and the full council about our progress on that front. But tonight it's a narrower focus, and so as I said, we had that $44 million and $705 million, 44 of state, 705 total local funds committed. And with the rescission, then we now have $675 million of local funding committed. That's thanks to the full funding commitments from the CTIB at $496 million last August, and from the Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority of their full $165 million, 10% commitment. So we're still at 82% of our overall needed local funding commitment, but that is 3 percentage points less than where we had finished last August with the local funding partner commitments. So just a sense of schedule, and that is many milestones. So assuming that we're able to successfully complete the review of the scope and cost and figure out a path forward on that here in the next 4 to 5 weeks, we'll complete the 60% design of the LRT project here in the October time frame. We'll complete the environmental work, which is the final environmental study, plus the FTA record of decision, is what ROD stands for, about this time in 2016. Soon thereafter, we expect FTA to give approval to enter engineering, which is the last phase of these big projects before they grant the full funding grant, which we are seeking at the end of 2016. Within the current federal administration with the support of the Obama administration. And if all that comes into alignment, then we'll be in heavy construction for 3 years, final integrated testing in early 2020, and revenue service thereafter in mid-2020. So that's kind of where we stand now, Chair and members. Any questions on that before we go to the numbers on how we're going to address our short-term problems?
Any questions at this juncture? Go ahead.
Great, then I'm going to take over and talk about how we plan to move forward with the state funding commitments without a commitment from the state. So this slide here shows the sources of funds from the state funding commitment that we have so far. So in 2009, we had some general obligation bonds of $5 million, and we have spent that totally down. In 2011, we also received a state deed grant. That is for some very specific bridge work. $2 million, we've spent about $200,000 of that and got $1.8 million of that available to spend in the future. And then as Mark said, we had a $37 million state general fund appropriation that was capital in nature. We've spent $6.9 million of that. And then an appropriation cancellation in this session took away most of the remaining funds from that. So we have a commitment from the state of $14.3 million. We spent 12.1 of that and $2.2 million remaining to spend. This next slide lays out our cash flow needs at a very high level through the length of the project. And you can see that we've got 12.1 million that we spent, and then lays out 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And then the second column lays out the state funding commitment of $14.3 million. And you can see if we look at 2015 that I have an immediate funding need. Our proposal to fill that, because that's an immediate cash need in 2015, is to tap our MVEST reserve funds. So MVEST is a all cash reserve, and therefore it meets the need of an immediate cash flow element. Also, MVEST can be spent for operations, or it can be spent for capital needs. And so there again, it meets our needs in terms of a funding source. I'll talk a little bit about MVEST, and you've heard me say as I've presented budgets to you that we have a budget assumption that we budget 95% of the state's current forecast, and then the actual receipts from the prior year that are above 95%. So that's about $260 million, so a fairly large amount of revenue coming in. Our MVEST reserve has a target minimum balance of $15 million. That's for the cash flow volatility month to month. So when I say that we budget 95% of the forecast plus 5% from the prior year, if we receive that, that is the amount that goes into the transportation operation budget. It doesn't matter how much I collect during the year. The MVest reserve has to handle that volatility month to month. Right now, the reserve balance is 28 million. That's the minimum balance plus actual receipts above 95%. That's how the MVest reserve grows. And the MVest reserve goes down in the following year when we budget use of those actual receipts. So I thought it would be good to look at this in a pictorial view. So the yellow arrows there show the projected MVest reserve transfer into the operating budget, and we do that in 2016 out into the future. What we'll be bringing forward to the council in a future budget amendment is to forego the 2016 transfer into the operating budget and instead amend the budget to move that to the Southwest project in the capital program. So the next question is, how do I make up for that $13 million that I just put to the project from the MVest reserves? And that's a good question. So as I said, MVest is a cash reserve, and we have an immediate need for cash in 2015. And so the other transportation operations fund, bus, rail, they have plenty of cash, but of course they can't handle a $13 million hit to their revenues. So in the last session, the legislature increased the council's base for general fund operations. That includes both one-time funds as well as some additional funds for the growth in metro mobility and to fund their share of the light rail. So those funds, some of which are one-time funds, just happens to be $13 million, will replace what would have been the MVest transfer into the operating budget. We will replace with the increased share of general fund appropriation. That's one-time money. So far, so good. So to the transportation operating budget, no impact on the transportation operating budget. To the MVest reserve, because we won't be making the transfer there, it will continue to grow with the actual receipts over 5% for the current. So far we've taken care of the one-time immediate cash flow gap that we have from the state canceling our appropriation. Our plan would be to bring each of these decisions to you kind of in a just-in-time approach. So the first decision we'll be asking you to make is just related to the MVest. Starting in 2016, we'll be starting to spend an additional $42 million, which we, again, will need to find the funding source for. So in 2016, the plan that we will bring you is to issue financing to pay for the cash flow needs of 2016. So certificates of participation are a financing tool that allows us to go to the market with a financing plan that says, for a share of our MVest receipts, the market will give us funds up front. So not considered debt, because unlike the bonds that we issued or the mortgage that you have on your home that have an asset that are backing them, certificates of participation have a revenue stream that's backing them. So the council would agree to budget 20 years into the future for the principal and interest payments on the certificates of participation, but there's not an asset that backs that financing. And so a way to finance without issuing debt. So as we look at the funding decision that includes the MVest reserve and now certificates of participation, we would be saying that we need to replace MVest then, going into the operating budget, with again, the increase in the state general fund transit operations. So at this point, we've solved the 2015 hole and the 2016 hole. And we have not tapped any funds that we would not be able to replace in the operating budget with the increase in general fund appropriation that we got from the legislature. Any funding decision beyond this would begin to affect transit operations. However, this gets us into the next legislative session as well, where we get another bite at the apple of the state bonding bill, or another bite at the apple of going forward with maybe a transit sales tax. So that would be our next funding decision then. So now we're past the point of having our full funding grant. We've been into another legislative session. Our alternative to funding without any state backing would be to issue certificates of participation that we don't have the funds to backfill. For each 40 million, it's about 3 million of principal and interest, so that kind of gives you a feel of how much of an impact that would be. Our hope would be that we're in the legislative session and we're again getting them to backfill the MVS for our operating budget so that we don't have an impact on transit operations. But these are all decision points, and we would expect to bring the council actions at each one of those decision points so that you're ready to make that go, no-go decision as we move forward and we learn more about where we stand. So the next steps for us would be a proposed budget amendment that we would bring both to Management Committee and Transportation Committee. The first piece of that would be to remove from the capital program the $29.7 million of state general fund appropriation that was canceled. We'll ask you then to replace that with $13 million of MVS reserve transfer, and the difference, 16.7, we would take out of the authorized program, because remember, the only things in the authorized program have to have identified and secured funding, and back to the planned part of the CIP, and we would bring that back to the future funding initiative. And with that, answer questions.
Any questions from committee members? Councilmember Ratajkowski.
Thank you, Chair Schreiber. I'm sort of not quite sure where to start, but I will start. I think the impact on it is that $16.7 million from authorized, right? The impact is that those things then don't move forward. Is that correct?
Chair and committee members, a little bit different than that. That will be the impact of the budget right now. We will remove the 29.7. We'll ask you to make a budget amendment to move 13 million from the MVS reserve and into the 2015 capital program. And then the 16.7 is already in the capital program as authorized, but because we don't have funding secured, we'll just move it to planned. Still be in the CIP, just in the planned portion rather than the authorized portion.
Right, but the impact of us being able to move forward on projects, it's those projects.
The impact, the immediate impact right now is we have $13 million of expenses around that in 2015 that we right now do not have a funding source with, unless I come forward with a budget amendment to you.
Councilmember Munn, did you have some comment?
Chair Schreiber, folks, I think this is a creative financing plan, and I think tapping our reserves is a manageable amount of risk to take, I think, for a good cause to keep Southwest moving forward. But I'm frustrated that the legislature puts us in a position to cannibalize operations and other services because they've chosen to rescind the funding. I find that disappointing. My question is, does the legislature's rescinding of funding send a bad message to the feds in terms of Minnesota's commitment to moving light rail forward?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Munt, it is not a positive message to FTA. They monitor these local funding decisions with great interest, and when they're here every month, we update them. So we will share with them at a probably higher level than with you this evening our plan to backfill for this rescission of the state funding, and where we're going to have to really make our case, as we've begun to lay out for the committee tonight, will be in our updated financial plan that we are required to submit to FTA, and we will do so at the end of this summer as part of our project update, and then that'll set the foundation for our request to move into engineering this time next year. And what FTA will do with that 20-year plan is they will look at our financial capacity as a council to fund our transit programs globally. And so they will look at that with a critical eye, and they will identify this as a additional stress on the council's transportation budget.
Any other comments? Councilmember Dorfman.
So the FTA doesn't specify the 10% state share. They just require the local funding. They don't really care where it comes from, although certainly a broader base is better. But it does, I mean, so when does this come to us for approval, or does it?
Madam Chair and committee members, we would look to be bringing a budget amendment both to transportation and to the management committee with the next meeting. Because as we said, that we are already have a cash flow issue for 2015. So we would just bring that piece that funds us through 2015. And then we would make another decision as we come to the end of 2015 before we start spending in 2016.
So we have a couple weeks, a month. So, I mean, I think it's creative. I want to talk with staff and others to see if we're creating some sort of dangerous precedents for moving forward for the region as a whole about funding this way. But, thanks.
I have to comment that I'm distressed. This is creative. This is getting us over this hump, but it's a dangerous precedent. With the legislature has a small enough partner in our transit development as it is, and to have us deal with the shortfall in this manner can get to be a habit, and a bad habit. And I don't like using the MVEST money because that can grow with the economy so well, and it's been providing the nice city stream. There was, I think, one of the provisions, I didn't follow legislation that closely, but that if we increase the sales tax, that could back the bonds for the state share, metro-only sales tax, because there's always that rub by the rural legislators who don't want to be paying for transit in the metro area. And if that sales tax had been increased enough to take care of at least the state share, we wouldn't have to have this conversation. And I rattled around those halls long enough to know if they find an easy out. I just don't want this to happen again and more. We'll just have to try to make our case better next year.
Madam Chair, as your Chief Financial Officer, I share your distress with financing in this manner. I will say that through 15 and 16, the option that we presented here at least is being able to be backfilled with the funding, the new funding that we got from the state. And so I can replenish the MVEST transfer, and I can replenish the first issuance of a COP if it comes to that. But it'll be a very tough decision if we get into that next legislative session, and if the state's not there fulfilling its share, the council's going to have a very tough decision. So as your Chief Financial Officer, this was not my first choice, but these certificates will definitely be marketable, so it's doable.
Okay.
but I am very conservative with our reserves. I'll just leave it at that.
Councilmember Munn.
Madam Chair, my reason for optimism is that the public is out ahead of politicians on this one. Polls consistently show that the public supports the additional half-cent sales tax for better transit. And I just think the politicians need to catch up with the public and our existing customers and the people who want to ride. The way I view this is 13 million of reserves, while that precedent brings home $827 million of federal funding that we would lose otherwise if we can't make our 50% commitment locally.
Any other comments? You didn't leave very many happy faces, can you tell?
Yeah, no.
Mine included.
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all we have on the agenda, so the meeting is adjourned. You didn't leave very many happy faces, can you tell?
Yeah, no.
Mine included.
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all we have on the agenda, so the meeting is adjourned.